So here's a stat that'll get your attention. The United States medical system is estimated to waste $760 billion annually. After years of ever-inflating medical costs, American companies and union benefit plans have alleged in a series of lawsuits that the country's biggest health insurers are squandering their money. Kraft Heinz, which employs 37,000 people, alleged Aetna paid millions of dollars of claims that never should have been paid, and has prevented the company from being able to figure out why. In another lawsuit filed in 2021 in the Eastern District of Virginia, trustees for a bankrupt trucking company accused United Healthcare and Harvard Pilgrim Health of making about $27 million in overpayments from the company's funds, and said the insurers blocked attempts to audit the payments. We're here with Eric Calciano, benefits and healthcare expert from New City Insurance. Eric, health insurance is one of the most valued benefits from an employee standpoint, and at over $1 trillion cost annually, typically the most expensive benefit for employers. Average cost per family is $22,000. That's up 20% over the last 5 years, and it's projected there's going to be another 7% increase in 2024. What are your thoughts about that? What's driving all those increases?
There's quite a few things. One of the pieces is that we are seeing a ripple effect from the pandemic, whereas some industries could feel that much faster, feel the inflation that came through much faster on that. When it comes to health insurance and healthcare, those contracts between the major hospital systems and the health insurers last anywhere from 2 to 3 years. So there's a time lag for when the hospitals are feeling this upward pressure in pricing. They're dealing with new supply chain issues. They're dealing with staffing issues, demand for higher pay from their employees. That all doesn't get seen on the insurance side until those contracts are up for renewal, and then the hospitals are demanding higher prices. That then gets passed along to the members on the plans and the businesses that run those plans in terms of higher premiums.
And how did COVID impact that?
Just because of all of the inflation that we saw in the wake of the pandemic. So just like how we've seen egg prices go up and all sorts of consumer goods drastically increase in cost. Same thing with healthcare. It's just it's just a little bit slower for it to happen because of those contracts.
Right. And employers have shifted more costs onto workers by requiring higher deductibles, higher monthly contributions, a variety of different ways that actually leave people paying more for medical bills. Is there another way around that, short of the employers having to pay more money? But how else can employees think about it? Because I know with our listeners, this is a major cost for them, and it's something that they absolutely have to have. Any thoughts or suggestions about that?
Yeah, there's really two components to that, right? One is what can the employees do? What can you do on an individual level? And then the other question is, what can businesses do? Because businesses account for 54% of the health plans, of the coverage of Americans. And that's followed by Medicare and Medicaid, which are about 18% each. So by far, employer-sponsored health plans are the greatest type of coverage in the country in terms of the percentage. And so when the strategies that employers bring to the table is going to be the most important way to help drive down costs. But for the individuals that are on those plans, there's less things that they can do because they're not the ones that are pulling the strings when it comes to the plan strategies. But within their plans, they can always make sure that they are educated on what types of plans that they're on. So basically being a good healthcare consumer, making sure they understand what they signed up for, what their deductible applies to, what services it applies to, what it doesn't. Does it apply to all services? Does it just apply to hospitals and major medical? Those types of things are important. And then understanding what your likely healthcare needs are over the next year and then making a good decision about that. And typically whether you're on an individual health plan, whether you're on Medicare, Medicaid, or through an employer-sponsored health plan, there is typically always an advisor that can help individuals look into that, understand what their plans are offering, and make sure that they're signing up for the plans that are going to work best for them.
Yeah, it all seems so complicated to me, and I've been in the insurance business, and it seems complicated to me. How, you just mentioned the advisor, but for our listeners, are there tips that they can think about, just specific things they can save a little bit of money on these plans that are so complicated?
Yeah. I think when it comes to the types of plans that you're going to sign up for, the major two types of plans are HMOs and PPOs. So understanding, HMOs are typically less expensive, so that might be the route that you'd want to go. But if you go to an HMO, it does require referrals to go see specialists. So you have a point of service where you're going to your primary care physician, and then they will recommend you or refer you out to any specialists that are required. So there's an extra step in the process as you're obtaining healthcare, but the cost is significantly cheaper. So that can be a good option for people that maybe have lower healthcare requirements and are not as concerned about seeing any doctor within a network and are okay with those referrals to keep costs lower for them. For those individuals that want to have all the physicians and hospitals available to them within that network, then the PPO is going to be the greater option. It's just that it's going to require an additional premium to accomplish that. The other thing too is just to be an advocate for yourself when it comes. So many claims, for example, are being auto adjudicated by these health insurers. So you've got with the BUCA carriers. So BUCA is the Blues, the United, Cigna, and Aetna. And whenever they process claims, about 95% are just no human ever looks at it. So it just gets processed by a computer. When we see that happen, errors happen regularly in the sense that the hospitals send in a claim for larger than what they should actually be owed. And because the system doesn't have a human checking it, then it just gets paid. So it's important to always be looking at what were my claims actually for? What did my provider provide to my health insurer? And if there were any issues with the claims, to advocate for yourself. And if a claim's denied, because that can happen often as well, to advocate, to appeal, to go through the process. And again, if you're on an employer-sponsored health plan, there's typically an advisor associated with that plan that can help you through that process. If you're on an individual health plan, then you can also go through those processes on your own. But they can be time-consuming, but it can be worth it if you're dealing with significant medical bills. So the other component to look at is, for individuals that are not offered employer-sponsored health plans, or even if you are offered an employer-sponsored health plan, but the plan is not affordable for you, there are low and no cost options for healthcare that are run either through the state on the state-run health plan called Medicaid, or through the Affordable Care Act exchange. So depending on where your income's at, if you're on Medicaid, then the premiums are covered 100%. You don't have a monthly premium for your benefits. And then with the Affordable Care Act plans, and you can go to healthcare.gov to look at your options there, see if you qualify based on your age and income. If you do, then the subsidies can be quite strong. The government will pay for a significant portion of those benefits. It's on a sliding scale based on income, but the lower your income, you can get plans for as little as $1. So that can be a really good option, just depending on where you're at. And it never hurts to look and check on healthcare.gov and see if you may qualify based on those factors.
Tell us about these recent allegations that insurance carriers are overpaying health claims on behalf of their employer clients. Don't they have a fiduciary responsibility to their clients?
You would think that they do have a fiduciary responsibility. I personally think that they should have a fiduciary responsibility to their clients. The health insurers are arguing that they don't have a fiduciary responsibility for their clients. And when that's been tested in court, sometimes it's been stated that they do, and then it's been appealed and then stated that they don't. So it's more or less still engaged in legal battles to determine, are they truly a fiduciary fiduciary or not. Now, the sponsor for the health plan, so basically the company that runs the health plan, the employer, is a fiduciary, but the insurance company itself wants to argue that they're not a fiduciary. And when they can argue that, and if they can legally get that to be approved as the case, then they don't have to do their best to handle the funds of the plan in the best way possible.
Or there are new transparency rules, though, right? That maybe gives the employer a little bit more leverage in this?
They've been rolling out. So the hospital price transparency rule kicked in a couple of years ago, where hospitals were required to publish their pricing on 300 common procedures. But what we found with that, for example, is that there's very little teeth in that law. So while the law states that they need to publish those prices, most hospitals aren't complying, and they're just not posting the data, because the fine itself for non-compliance is $100,000. Now, these hospitals are dealing in the many millions on their balance sheets. So looking at $100,000, it just doesn't even affect them at all. So while I think those transparency rules are good and they're moving in the right direction, we're going to need to see some higher level of enforcement for them to make a big difference.
So if the hospitals and the insurers are overcharging the employers, who in turn are sharing cost and pushing cost sharing down to their employees, who are the ultimate consumer, how does that play out over time? Do we get class action lawsuits? What happens?
Yeah, well, we certainly are seeing lawsuits come into play at this point, where some major employers and unions are now suing the major insurance companies. So, for example, Kraft Heinz is filing a suit against Aetna. United Healthcare also has some suits against them as well. So we are seeing that happening, where these companies are saying, well, if we are, because as we talked about with the fiduciary rules, even if the insurer is not a fiduciary, the employer or the union is a fiduciary. And so they can't do their job to make sure that they are treating and handling the money the right way if that information is not being made transparent by their insurer so that they understand where claims are going. And that's the biggest claim that's happening right now, is they're saying claims are being mishandled, and the insurer is not providing us information for us to be able to verify how those claims are being handled. And we need that information. We need more transparency.
You hear a lot of politicians and you hear consumers, and now it sounds like you're hearing corporations say our healthcare system is broken. What do you think about that? And what if it is broken, what are some of the solutions?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think that when it comes to health insurance, it is such a mammoth industry that we have. And it's hard to know exactly what's going to be the best solution across the country. But when I look at, as I talked about earlier, that over half of the individuals covered in this country are on employer-sponsored health plans, then that's a place where we can really target for improving health plans by removing waste from health plans. And we see a lot of waste from those BUCA carriers, the Blues, United, Cigna, and Aetna. And employers have more ability to customize their health plans than, say, on the individual market or with Medicaid, where there's no real pull from an individual consumer. But on an employer-sponsored plan, because they've got a pool of employees, they are able to customize their health plans, work with administrators that are going to manage claims better. They can work with pharmacy benefit managers that are not greatly inflating the costs of drugs. Those types of solutions and are what I think is going to have a great effect on reducing healthcare costs in this country, because the employers are understanding that they need to keep this affordable for their business. And so they are the ones that are looking most at ways to be most efficient with our dollars that are being spent.
You mentioned the size of the healthcare industry. I've heard stats that it represents 20 to 22% of the GDP in the country. That's a huge industry. Hard to change, and a lot of people rely on that. Do you think that we oftentimes with insurance and maybe as consumers, as policyholders, focus on, really, there's too much of a focus on surgery, on pharma solutions, on, just having different procedures as opposed to more holistic health, which might come in under employer health and wellness type plans. What are your thoughts about that?
I always love the idea of encouraging health. I think that the saying of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure is very true when it comes to our personal health. We know that individuals who eat well and treat their bodies well and make sure that they are going to receiving their annual physicals fare out better in the long run, and that reduces the cost burden on everybody when that happens. Tell me what you see. I hear their cry. My hesitation around that is always that one of the hardest things to do is to change human behavior. So, how do we really encourage individuals to change their behavior? And wellness plans that are through employer-sponsored plans, those can certainly help. They need to be administered the right way, though, because otherwise it's hard to get engagement from the employees. So it needs to be done with the right strategies. But we are even seeing, even just from the insurers, they are putting out more and more wellness types of solutions that are just built into their plans. So now in the more recent years, a lot of times they'll have added benefits that are just included by being enrolled for gym discounts, and they'll have built-in mental health services for mental health. We're seeing a lot more telehealth so that people have easier access to a doctor, low cost and just quick access to be able to obtain care quickly before an issue becomes a larger issue. So those, I think, are good trends and would certainly like to see that continue. But when it comes to relying on wellness plans to make a drastic difference, the key there is how do you get people behind that? How do you actually get people to change their behavior, which can be tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think stats would say we're not the most healthy nation in the world. And I think, and we also know that so many illnesses and sicknesses and death, comes from lifestyle situations as opposed to catching a virus or a disease or something. And so I think it would seem that it would behoove all employers and the whole system to really focus on employee health a little bit more, but then it's counterbalanced by the fact that it's 20% of the GDP, right? So it's big business. Yeah, it's a quandary. Yeah,
and the more engagement we can get with those types of things is certainly great. So we do see within plans a lot of plans will have smoking cessation programs. They'll have diabetic and pre-diabetic programs to help those individuals maintain a healthy lifestyle, keep the diabetes from causing any greater health problems. So those types of things, when accessed early, and it's things like smoking cessation to stop habits that have clear health consequences, those definitely are really great to see when people engage in those on a personal level, but then also, on the population level as well, because that reduces risks for everybody. It increases the overall health of the country, which should, in theory, reduce healthcare costs.
One last question, Eric. You're obviously an expert in this, all of this, and I appreciate your views and your perspectives on it. In your opinion, what is the future of healthcare in the United States?
I think in the short to midterm, we are going to continue to see costs rise. Unfortunately, that's the trend that we're seeing over the course of this next year. I believe as we see inflation everywhere, it's going to continue to hit healthcare. Healthcare consistently outpaces inflation, and I think we'll continue to see that. I do think there's going to be a point at which you get more, and we're seeing this now, where more and more businesses, those that hold the ability to really customize their health plans more so than in an individual. When you go to the individual market, for example, with Medicaid, you get X amount of options and that's all you get. But with employer-sponsored health plans, those that are really in control in pulling the levers on those plans and picking the components that build up those plans, they have a lot of ability to manage a plan in a way that removes the waste from the plans. And there's been this status quo where for years and years, the major health insurance carriers have had such a foothold that everyone just follows along with that. But now we're seeing this pushback, right? We're starting to see that with the lawsuits that are being filed, like the one with Hines versus Aetna. When we see that start to happen and that kind of pushback, we're going to start seeing those businesses say, we know there's other solutions out there. We know that it's not only Aetna that can administer a health plan. And we can work with other carriers that are going to operate with a level of transparency that will help us make sure that our employees are getting the best healthcare that they can for the best dollar that they can. So that's where I from an optimistic viewpoint, I hope that this continues in the sense that there's a pushback against the insurers so that we can make sure that healthcare is operated in a way that works best for the consumer.
Well, thank you, Eric, for all of your insightful comments. I'm sure it's been very helpful for our listeners. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mike. Thank you for having me.